I'm not sure how to start this, but maybe a warning is as good a place as any. If you're listening to this, be ready. Because once I got into this journal, I found myself wishing I'd never picked it up. This isn't just a story. It's the life of someone who witnessed. Well, you'll see. A friend in forestry handed me this, someone who came across the journal after. Let's just say, after it was misplaced. He knew I had a thing for strange, unsolved cases, the kind that never make the news, and figured I'd want to read it. But I wasn't ready for what I'd find in here. The journal belonged to a forest ranger. Let's call him Robert. I have some scraps of background on him from the files that came with it. Robert was mid-30s, stationed deep in one of those forests out west where it's nothing but trees for miles. Most of his work was solitary, hours spent keeping trails clear, watching the weather, reporting back. Just him and the woods for weeks on end. At first, he kept notes like you'd expect. Basic logs, routines, weather patterns. But then something shifted. And if I'm being honest, whatever he saw out there, it got to him. You can watch him unravel in his notes, his words shifting from stable and grounded to something else. But the more I read, the more I realized it wasn't just his mind going. Something real was happening out there. So before I start reading, I'm giving you one last chance to stop listening. This isn't about myths or rumors or ghost stories told around a fire. It's about things that shouldn't exist, things that can follow you long after you've left the forest. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it, and you may find yourself looking over your shoulder a little more often. All right, if you're still with me, let's begin with Robert's first entry. Back when he was just a ranger, back when he thought he was just doing his job. I don't usually write these things, but tonight was different. I need to get this down before I forget what I saw. I'm stationed out in Pine Hollow National Forest. It's one of those places where the trees stretch endlessly, and the nights are so dark you can't even see your hand in front of your face. It's supposed to be peaceful, the kind of job that lets you clear your head and enjoy nature. Most nights it's just me, the trails, and the sounds of the forest waking up or winding down. But tonight wasn't like that. It started with an odd smell. Not the usual earthy scent you'd expect after a rainstorm, but something sour and metallic, like rusted metal mixed with rotting flesh. I'd never smelled anything like it before, not out here. I was doing my routine patrol along the Ridge Trail, a narrow path that skirts the edge of the denser woods. The air was unusually cold, biting through my jacket and making my breath visible in the dim light of my flashlight. As I walked, the silence was oppressive. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just the crunch of my boots on the gravel and the distant rustle of leaves. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was probably just some dead animal, or maybe a skunk out for the night. But that smell lingered, thick in the air, making it hard to breathe. I reached a clearing near the ridge, a spot I'd passed dozens of times before. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I saw it. A strange arrangement of bones and fur, twisted together in a way that looked almost deliberate. My heart started pounding as I approached cautiously, every step echoing in the eerie stillness. There was something else too, something moving just beyond the edge of the trail. I turned my flashlight towards it, and for a split second I caught sight of a figure. It was tall and thin, with limbs that bent at unnatural angles, almost like they were made of shadow rather than flesh. Its eyes reflected the light in a way that made them seem endless, like dark voids staring right through me. I froze, staring at it, feeling a mix of fear and fascination. It didn't move like any animal I'd ever seen. Instead, it glided silently between the trees, almost as if it was floating. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it was just a trick of the light or some rare animal I wasn't familiar with. But the way it watched me, as if it was studying my every move, made me uneasy. I took a step back, but it didn't follow. Instead, it seemed to fade into the darkness. leaving me alone with that lingering smell and an unsettling feeling that something was very wrong out here. I scanned the area with my flashlight, half expecting to see it again, but there was nothing. Just the clearing, the strange pile of bones, and the oppressive silence. I decided to mark the spot with some chalk and take some photos, thinking I could show them to someone back at the station. As I knelt down to sketch the arrangement, I heard it again, the low hum. It was barely audible, like a distant engine, but it vibrated through my chest, making my teeth chatter. I looked up just in time to see the figure reappear, this time moving towards me with a deliberate slowness. Panic set in as I realized this thing wasn't just watching me. It was coming closer. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it directly at it, hoping to scare it off. But instead of retreating, it paused, almost mesmerized by the light. I felt a chill run down my spine as it tilted its head, as if trying to understand what I was doing. Without warning, it lunged forward with terrifying speed, grabbing my arm with claws that felt like ice. I yelped in pain and kicked at it, managing to break free and stumble backward. The flashlight slipped from my hand, clattering to the ground and extinguishing the beam. In the sudden darkness, I could hear the creature's breathing. Calm, measured, almost human-like. I fumbled to turn my flashlight back on, but before I could get it working, the hum stopped. The creature was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I stood there, heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. There were scratches on my arm, deep enough to draw blood, and my jacket was torn where it had grabbed me. I dragged myself out of the clearing, limping back to my patrol car with the photos and sketches I'd taken. Once inside, I took a moment to catch my breath and bandage my wounds. As I looked through the pictures, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The figure was barely visible, almost like a shadow moving through the trees, but those eyes were real. They seemed to follow me, even on the photos. I reviewed my sketches, trying to make sense of the symbols I'd drawn near the bone arrangement. They looked like some sort of ancient runes or markings, but I couldn't place them. Maybe I'd seen something similar in old folklore or local legends, but nothing came to mind. The Ranger's work had never taken me into the realm of myths before, so this was all new territory. As I sit here writing this, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. The forest out there isn't supposed to be anything more than trees and wildlife, but tonight proved me wrong. There's something out there, something that shouldn't exist, and I have no idea what it wants or why it's here. Tomorrow night I'll have to go back and investigate more. Maybe there are more signs, more clues about what's happening in Pine Hollow. I just hope I'm not alone out there again. If this thing is real, and if it's anything like the first encounter, I might not make it back in one piece. For now, I need to rest and try to calm down. But I know sleep won't come easy, not with the memories of tonight replaying in my mind. Something's wrong in this forest, and I'm determined to find out what it is, even if it means risking my sanity to uncover the truth. If last night was strange, tonight was a whole different level. I'm starting to wonder what I've actually gotten myself into out here. All day I couldn't get that figure out of my head. Those dark, bottomless eyes, the way it seemed to blend right into the shadows. I felt like I was going crazy, but the scratches on my arm are proof. I didn't dream any of it. When I finally dragged myself back to the trail tonight, I had this mix of dread and curiosity. I don't know what's keeping me here, but I've got to know what's happening. I started by going back to the clearing where I'd found that bone arrangement. Even in daylight, the place felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, like the whole forest was holding its breath. The bone pile was just as I'd left it, but in the daylight I noticed things I'd missed before. There were symbols scratched into the dirt around it, some kind of ancient markings, not like anything I've seen before. Almost like runes you'd see in old books or on ancient artifacts, each with sharp, angular lines and jagged edges. I grabbed my notepad and started sketching them, jotting down every detail I could manage. Some of the markings looked like they'd been carved with something sharp, maybe even claws. That's when I noticed it. Fresh claw marks on the surrounding trees, too high up to be from any normal animal. They sliced right through the bark in clean, powerful lines, almost deliberate, like they were marking territory. That smell was back too. The same metallic, rotting odor from last night. I don't know how I could have missed it before, but now, with the daylight to guide me, I followed the scent past the clearing and further into the forest, deeper than I'd been before. Every instinct told me to turn back, but something kept pushing me forward. After about 20 minutes, the trees opened up to reveal a small, murky pond. The water was black, almost tar-like, with a faint shimmer that suggested it wasn't just water. Surrounding the pond were more of those strange markings, drawn into the mud like they'd been left behind by some creature pacing in circles. And near the water's edge, I saw something even more disturbing. Scattered remains of animal bones, arranged in more of those twisted, unsettling patterns. I took photos, trying to capture the details for reference. Then I noticed a faint noise coming from the other side of the pond. It was soft at first, almost like humming, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to pulse with the earth itself. I felt my heart rate spike as I strained to hear it, wondering if it was just the wind. But the noise grew louder, turning into a strange, guttural chant that echoed across the pond. My pulse was racing. I raised my flashlight even though it was barely dusk, and that's when I saw it again. The same figure from last night, only this time it was crouched by the water, facing away from me, hunched over something in the mud. Its limbs looked even longer, thinner in the fading light, and I could just make out the shape of its hands. They were twisted, almost claw-like, digging into the earth. As quietly as I could, I took a step back, but I must have stepped on a branch or something, because the sound was enough to make it turn. It didn't react immediately, just watched me, those eyes glowing faintly, as if sizing me up. I couldn't move. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were cemented to the ground. And then, with an unnatural speed, it stood up and moved toward me, its lanky frame gliding over the earth without a sound. My instincts finally kicked in. I turned and bolted back toward the trail, not daring to look back. The chanting had stopped, but I could still hear its footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, like it was toying with me, letting me know it could catch up if it wanted to. I burst out of the trees, panting and covered in sweat, and didn't stop until I reached my patrol car. When I finally caught my breath, I forced myself to go through the photos I'd taken. And there, plain as day, was a blurry outline of that figure crouching by the pond, its claw-like hands reaching into the mud, surrounded by those same strange symbols. The photo was grainy and dim, but I knew what I'd seen. No one else would believe me, but I had the proof right there. Tonight I started looking into local legends, hoping for some clue about what I might be dealing with. I didn't find much, but I did come across an old story about a watcher that guards the forest. A creature that keeps intruders away and leaves them marked. They say it's ancient, older than the trees themselves, tied to the land and bound to protect it. But from what? I'm not sure what to believe, but if that thing is the watcher, then what's it protecting this forest from? Or worse? Who put it here to begin with? For now, I'm just trying to stay calm, though it's getting harder to ignore this creeping sense of dread that's been settling over me. I'll go back tomorrow. Part of me knows I shouldn't, but something about this mystery won't let me go. It's like an itch I can't scratch, a pull that drags me back, even though I know I'm risking my life. I just hope I'm not out here alone with this thing. If I'm being honest, I don't even know why I kept going. The smarter part of me said, turn around, forget the sound, let it go. But out here, curiosity can sneak up on you, even when you know it could get you killed. Tonight I learned the hard way just how dangerous that pull can be. It started just after sundown. I'd finished my regular patrol and everything seemed normal, quiet even. But as I was heading back, I caught this faint sound drifting on the breeze. It was too soft to make out, but something about it made my skin prickle. It almost sounded like someone was calling out from deep within the trees. I listened closer and realized it sounded like Harris, a buddy of mine who'd vanished in these woods 6 months ago. I know it sounds crazy, right? But the voice was dead on, the exact same way Harris used to call me over. Low and familiar. It shouldn't have been possible, but I swear it was him. Against my better judgment, I started following the sound, stepping deeper into the trees, away from the usual trail. It felt like the forest was guiding me somewhere, leading me to something it didn't want me to ignore. After a few minutes, I found myself standing at the entrance to a cave half buried by overgrown vines and moss. I've been working this forest long enough to know every nook and cranny, but this cave, it was new. Or if it wasn't new, it had been hidden well enough that I'd never noticed it before. The call came again, faint, echoing from inside the darkness. I don't know what possessed me to go in, but something about that voice kept pulling me forward. If there was even a chance Harris was in there, I couldn't just walk away. Inside, it was pitch black, even with my flashlight. The walls were damp, narrow, and close enough to touch on either side, pressing in on me as I crept further. The call echoed again, but this time it was different. Instead of sounding like Harris, it sounded like me. Same tone, same pitch. I froze, shining my flashlight around, trying to make sense of it. The walls were etched with strange, curling symbols, like ancient carvings left by people long gone. They didn't look random. They were almost like containment markings, etched deep into the stone, as if they'd been there for centuries. Then, just as I was taking a closer look at one of the carvings, something in the shadows moved. I aimed my light, and that's when I saw it. A twisted, skeletal figure wrapped in thick layers of moss and vines, its limbs long and bent at unnatural angles. It stood perfectly still, its face half covered by a tangle of roots, as if it had grown right out of the cave walls. But the worst part, it was watching me. I could feel its gaze, even though I couldn't see its eyes. And then it spoke again, in my voice. Harris. I called out almost instinctively. But the thing just stared, silent and still. Then, a beat later, it repeated my words back to me, but something was off. It wasn't a true echo. It was like it was trying to learn how I spoke, mimicking the exact tone but with something twisted underneath. There was a mocking quality to it, as if it enjoyed toying with me. I took a step back, and the thing shifted, inching forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. I could hear it breathing, a slow, rattling sound that seemed to fill the cave. I took another step, and it mirrored me, closing the distance each time I tried to retreat. My flashlight flickered, and in that moment, I saw it stretch one arm toward me, its fingers tipped with vine-like claws that dragged along the walls. Some part of me knew I had to get out, but it was like the cave had its own pull, keeping me in place. I managed to tear my gaze away long enough to spot an opening behind me. Slowly, inch by inch, I started moving toward it. The creature seemed to realize I was leaving and called out one last time, its voice echoing through the chamber, louder, more insistent. "Don't go." The words echoed in the cave, my own voice twisted and wrong, and for a second it almost sounded sad. I don't know what it was trying to do. Keep me there, lure me back, or maybe just understand me. But I wasn't about to find out. I bolted, rushing out of the cave, and as I hit the open air, I could still hear it calling my name, its voice rising and falling in a strange, almost rhythmic pattern. I didn't stop running until I was halfway back to camp. Only then did I dare to look back. The cave was hidden in shadows, silent again, as if it had never been there. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. That thing had learned to speak like me, to mimic voices, to reach inside my mind somehow. And it felt like it was learning, getting closer to understanding what makes us tick. I have no idea what it is or how long it's been hiding out here, but one thing's for sure. This forest is more than just a stretch of trees and trails. It's full of things that don't just want to hide. They want to know us, understand us, and they're willing to take whatever they need to make that happen. They tell you to keep your eyes peeled for wildlife, to respect their space. But what do you do when the forest itself has something else lurking in it? I'd seen odd carcasses before. Bits of fur or bones in strange patterns, always eerie but natural enough. But today, I stumbled into something entirely new, and I wish I hadn't. I was walking my usual patrol path near dusk, that time of day when shadows play tricks on your mind. I started noticing these scattered remains, like the forest had just chewed up some animals and spit them out, half digested. At first, it was just a hair, torn up in a way that didn't make sense. Further along, I found the remains of a raccoon, and a bit beyond that, the mangled pieces of a deer. Whatever was responsible had left nothing but a pattern of blood and bones stretching out like breadcrumbs, leading me deeper. I pushed through a denser section of trees and then I saw it. Suspended between two massive pine trunks was a twisted structure. A web, but nothing like any spider's work. It was made from sinew and flesh, stretched tight and eerie, sticky strands that seemed to pulse faintly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. It was glistening, almost alive, and tangled up in its fibers were more bits of fur, bones, and unidentifiable chunks that made my stomach turn. I took a step closer, carefully. The air was heavy, humid. I didn't realize how quiet it had gotten until the silence pressed against my ears. I reached into my pack, grabbing my flashlight. Then I heard it. Something skittering, low and close, like claws scraping over bark. And then it came out of the shadows. This thing. It was like a spider, but twisted, wrong, almost humanoid in parts. Each limb was a sinewy, fleshy arm, twitching as it climbed along its web. Its head, or what should have been a head, was a mass of shifting limbs, almost like it was constantly remaking itself. But what struck me most were the faces, human-like, animal-like, half-formed, twitching, like the remnants of whatever it had taken. They'd appear and disappear, as if it was struggling to hold itself together. And I swear, in that second, one of those faces looked like it was mouthing words, like it was trying to speak. I backed up, but my boot snapped a twig, and in that split second it froze. All of its eyes turned to me. Too many eyes, glossy and dark, reflecting the beam of my flashlight, and it launched toward me, skittering on those horrid limbs, its body making a sickening, wet noise as it moved. I stumbled back, barely able to keep the light steady, and that's when I noticed it. Every time the beam flashed directly at it, the creature hesitated, twisting its body away, almost recoiling. It was like it couldn't stand the brightness. So I did the only thing that came to mind. I turned the light to full, pointing it right at the creature's center. It screeched, the sound almost human but mangled, distorted, echoing off the trees. In its moment of weakness, I forced myself to run, feeling branches claw at my face and arms as I sprinted out of the thicket. I could hear it crashing through the trees behind me, the wet, slapping sounds of its limbs hitting the ground, faster than anything I'd ever heard. I kept the flashlight trained behind me, my fingers white-knuckling the handle. Somehow I made it back to the main trail, and when I dared to look over my shoulder, the thing was gone, retreating into the shadows. I kept the flashlight on, spinning around every few steps, my breath coming in short gasps. I thought I was alone, but here's the thing. I found something after catching my breath. Just off the trail, right where I'd nearly tripped, I noticed a strange, almost metallic glint in the dirt. I crouched down, still panting, and pulled it out. It was a small, rusted plate, marked with faded symbols I didn't recognize. Ancient, maybe, or just old in a way that felt unnatural. It made me wonder, was someone else out here dealing with these things? Trying to contain them, maybe? Was this plate left by someone, or something, that knew what lay hidden in this forest long before I did? I don't know who or what might be working behind the scenes out here, but if they're real, they're either braver or crazier than I am. Or maybe they know something about these creatures I don't. I made it back to my station, my clothes torn, scratches and bruises blooming all over my skin, but grateful to be in one piece. Tonight, that web, that fleshy, pulsating horror, and the faces, those are burned into my mind. And the worst part is, there's a voice at the back of my head saying I'll have to go back. That maybe next time I'll have to figure out what all this means. I'm not sure where to begin with what happened today. The forest has always felt alive to me, but today it was different. I don't think I was alone out there, not in the way you'd expect. My patrol had me heading into the deeper parts of the forest, far from the usual trails and footpaths. Hardly anyone's been out this way in months, so it's usually dead quiet. But today, almost immediately, I started seeing these strange little figures hanging in the trees. They looked like crude dolls or scarecrows, maybe, made from twisted sticks, animal bones, and sinew. They were strung up by branches, swaying faintly, even though the air was still. At first, I brushed them off as some kind of old tribal markers, maybe relics from campers who came through here ages ago. But something about them was unsettling. They seemed to be placed with purpose, spaced just so, almost like they'd been watching, waiting, long before I'd even arrived. I kept moving, but with each step, I could feel this sense of unease pressing down on me. It wasn't just the figures. It was like the whole forest was aware of my every move. I tried to ignore it, keep my mind focused on the task, but then, just as I was rounding a dense cluster of trees, I heard it. A soft rustling behind me. When I turned around, nothing seemed out of place, but I could have sworn one of the effigies was closer. Just by a few feet, like it had somehow crept forward without making a sound. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was all in my head. But the more I walked, the more it felt like they were closing in on me, each time a little nearer whenever I looked away. My heart was pounding now, and every instinct told me to keep my eyes on them. But at the same time, I didn't want to stare too long, like that might somehow trigger something I wasn't ready to face. I could feel a cold sweat gathering at the back of my neck. It was irrational, maybe, but the feeling kept gnawing at me. That these things weren't just random forest decorations. They were there with intent. When I finally dared to stop and take a longer look, I noticed something on the ground near the base of a large oak tree. Etched into the dirt were markings, symbols that looked eerily similar to the ones I'd seen on that metal plate. They formed a rough boundary around the trees, almost like a perimeter line. And that's when I realized. These effigies weren't just scare tactics. They were contained here, held within this marked area by something or someone. It hit me all at once. Someone had set up these symbols to create a boundary. The forest was no longer just wild. It was organized, sectioned off. Like someone had been managing it, drawing invisible lines to keep certain things where they belonged. These effigies were part of that control. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started edging closer to one of the figures, trying to see if there was something else that tied it to this area. But as soon as I crossed the boundary of those markings, the air changed. The rustling behind me picked up again, and in the corner of my eye I could swear the effigy moved. Just a small jerk of its limbs, as though testing its restraints. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, almost losing my balance. I turned away, started walking as fast as I could without breaking into a full run. I'd barely made it 10 steps before that same rustling sounded louder, almost like whispering, right behind me. I stopped dead in my tracks and slowly turned around to face them. Sure enough, one of the effigies was right at the edge of the symbols, watching me with its empty sockets and twisted limbs. Another figure stood just behind it, and another. It was as if they were waiting for me to cross the line again, daring me to break the boundary once more. The sight of them standing there, frozen but ready, chilled me to the core. It took every ounce of nerve I had to turn my back on them, to just keep walking. With each step, I felt that unyielding weight lift slightly, like they were finally releasing me. It was only when I was well beyond the tree line that the rustling stopped, and the forest fell silent. But even then, I couldn't shake the thought that the forest wasn't just containing these things. It was almost as if the forest itself was aware, using these markers as its own defenses. And for a moment I had to wonder, was someone actively maintaining these boundaries, or had they simply been left there for someone like me to stumble upon? I took one last look over my shoulder, half expecting those twisted figures to have followed me out, but they hadn't. They were bound, restrained to their section of the forest. The relief should have been comforting, but instead it felt like a warning. Those symbols, that feeling of an unseen force. It all points to something larger, something I'm only beginning to understand. Whatever is being held back out here, it's powerful enough that someone, or something, went to great lengths to keep it in check. If these effigies are just one part of the forest's defenses, then what else could be lurking out here? And who, or what, is responsible for keeping it all contained? You know how some sounds hit you so deep in the gut that they're almost physical? That's the only way I can describe the howls I heard today. They started faintly, barely audible over the rustling leaves, just as the sky started shifting to twilight. I figured it was a pack of coyotes or wolves, something I could handle, but the tone wasn't right. It was long, low, and somehow too steady, echoing with an almost metallic edge. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The howling led me to a clearing deeper into the forest, where the light barely touched. The place felt wrong. I can't say it any other way. In the center was a dead deer, sprawled out in an unnatural position. Its hide had been carved with symbols I hadn't seen before, intricate shapes that seemed etched too perfectly, too carefully for any animal. The cuts were too precise, not random tears from a predator. There was an eerie elegance to the symbols, like someone or something was trying to leave a message. I barely had time to process it when I saw them. The shadows. There were 3 of them, tall and unnaturally thin, each hovering just above the ground. They were like silhouettes that had been pulled from nightmares, with stretched, canine-like faces and empty, gaping sockets where their eyes should have been. They didn't move like they were bound to the earth, but instead floated in an almost graceful, slow glide, circling the clearing like they were surveying a ritual site. My first instinct was to freeze, hoping they hadn't noticed me. But then, as if sensing my presence, one of them lifted its head and let out this low, guttural howl. It wasn't a howl in any natural sense. More like a sound that came from the earth itself, vibrating through every bone in my body. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it barely helped. The noise was inside me, shaking me to the core, as if my own body was rebelling. The pain was intense, throbbing through my skull and down my spine, like a warning from my own nerves to get out. I stumbled backward, almost blind with disorientation, barely able to keep my footing. I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to get away from those things. As I turned to run, the shadows glided closer, their hollow eye sockets fixed on me, tracking my every move. They never sped up. They didn't have to. Every howl made my body feel heavier, my senses dulled, and my vision blurred. Every step felt like a mile, but I forced myself forward, staggering through the trees, too afraid to look back. Then, just when I thought the howling would knock me to my knees, I saw it. A tree with a strange symbol carved deep into the bark, slightly glowing in the dim light. It looked similar to the markings on the plate I'd found days ago, but this was different. The symbol was more precise, with a spiraling design surrounded by rough lines. Instinctively, I stumbled toward it, throwing myself against the tree and hoping it would somehow save me. To my surprise, the howling lessened. The three shadowy figures stopped just shy of the tree line, their canine faces twisting as if they were confused or even repelled. They hovered there, almost pacing, howls now coming in shorter bursts, as though testing my defenses. I realized the symbol on the tree was doing something. It was like a barrier they couldn't cross, that symbol. It wasn't random. Someone had carved it there deliberately, and judging by the wear on the bark, it wasn't recent. It struck me that this might be more than just an ancient marking. It felt like some kind of ward, a way to keep these horrors in check. But who had put it there? And why did it seem like this whole forest was scattered with markers that could protect or contain these entities? Once the creatures faded back into the trees, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My ears were still ringing, and every part of my body ached as if I'd been hit by waves of force. I'd been in plenty of dangerous situations out here, but this was the first time I felt genuinely outmatched, like I was trespassing on territory that wasn't meant for me. Those creatures, they weren't hunting. They were guarding. The forest's been here long before I ever stepped foot in it, and I'm starting to realize that some things here aren't just passing through like me. They belong here, and maybe they see me as the intruder. And now, for the first time, I'm wondering if the organization I work for, the one that claims to understand this place, really knows what it's dealing with. I don't know who marked that tree or when, but whoever did it might be long gone. Still, they must have known these entities, these shadow beasts, needed something to keep them in line. And if they had to set up protections this deep in the woods, that means they expected these things to roam free. Or worse, they had to be contained. As I limped my way back to the station, I kept turning over the same thought in my head. If those symbols could repel these entities, how many other marks are out here, hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be activated? And if those creatures are guarding something, then there might be something in these woods even they're afraid of. So, that's where we leave Robert. For now. It's hard to imagine anyone going through what he did in those first few encounters, and it's clear he was already starting to question everything he knew about those woods. But the story doesn't end here. In fact, this was just the beginning. Things are about to get even darker, and from what I've seen in his later entries, let's just say the worst is yet to come. If you want to find out what happens next, if you're ready to hear how far down the rabbit hole Robert really went, be sure to tune into part 2. Because trust me, what's coming will make everything he's faced so far look like child's play. So if you're ready to face what Robert discovered, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss part 2, and leave a comment below if you think you'd make it out of that forest. Because after seeing what's coming, I'm not so sure any of us would. Until next time, stay safe and remember, some things in this world are better left unseen.